Hey, cool kids. Welcome into the Cool Grandpa podcast. This week we have returning guest Richard Eyre. He is joining us to talk about his brand new book, The Grandparenting Blueprint: How to Teach Your Grandchildren Life's Most Important Lessons. Now, if Richard sounds familiar, it's because he's been on the podcast once or twice, and we've had some great discussions both on the podcast and off the podcast about grandparenting. Richard is also a New York Times bestselling author with a number of books stretching back into the 80s, all about values parenting. So you're going to hear us really enjoy digging in about his book, but also about this idea of, let's call them secrets that grandparents can tell to their grandchildren, just about life and everything. Before we get started with that, though, I do want to remind you, please go over to the cool-grandpa.us, check out my store, and look for some wonderful merchandise over there. I've got mouse pads, I've got mugs, I've got tumblers, of course, the polo shirts and the ball caps, everything out there to recognize the cool grandpa in your life, as well as signaling to everybody just what a cool grandpa you are. So, without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Richard. Richard Eyre, welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. It's been too long since we've talked.
It has, Greg, but we're like old buddies now. We've done this over the years. I don't know about you, but I just keep getting better as a grandpa. How about you?
I know I keep learning, and I think it's like the old cliche, the more I learn, the more I understand how much I don't know.
Yeah, what's probably happening is you're becoming a better grandpa, but you're aware of your flaws more, so you don't think you're as good as you really are.
Right, right. That's good. That little, double-edged sword there, right? Is like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
realize you become aware of some of your shortcomings as a grandfather and a parent of adult kids.
We're going to talk about this book. This is the first copy I've held in my hand because it just barely came out. And I was with a friend the other night and he said, why do you keep writing books at your age? He said, why don't you just slow down and quit writing books? And I said, the only way I really master anything or even get close to mastering it is if I can write a book about it. So I said, I'm writing this because I want to be a good grandpa. And if I write a book on it, that'll surely make me better. And the fun thing about the book is, Greg, is I've never done this before, that the grandkids wrote part of this book. Each thing I'd write, they had a chance to comment, and we put them in by name and age, and we didn't change a thing. We even left their spelling like it was. And you talk about candor, it's just straight out of the kid's mouth. In fact, one guy, a friend of mine actually said, I got a copy and I'm just skipping past the parts you wrote because I want to read what the grandkids said.
Yeah, and those back and forths a little bit like you have in your book can be really interesting, and then it can be really eye-opening too, because I'm sure the grandkids were realizing whatever we write down, people are really going to see, and it's not just a conversation over a dinner table.
Yeah, no, that's right. They were very conscientious about it because, as you know, a large part of the book is about what we call grandfather's secrets. They're the principles or the life lessons that I want to leave with my grandkids as a legacy. And I went through two learning processes. Right. The first one was I was trying to get them to sit down and I was calling them grandfather's principles. And the kids they were like, when does this lecture get over, And then I changed it to grandfather's life lessons. That was even worse because it had the word lessons in it. And then I had a stroke of inspiration. A summer had gone by in the meantime, and we're back together for our reunion. And I said, hey, I've got a list of secrets. Would you like to know what some of them are? And suddenly I had their attention. And so that was the first breakthrough. And then I said, I think I'm going to write a book on these. First of all, I'll need your permission because they're supposed to be our secrets between us. But if you'll give me permission, I'm going to put them in a book. So we had a discussion about that. And then I said, how'd you like to help me write it? And they were like, That sounds like an assignment. They're too excited. And then I told them about, can you guess? Difficulties.
Okay.
And suddenly they were very interested. 23 of my grandkids contributed to the book. So each of them is going to get 1/23rd of half of the royalties. I'm keeping half. The other half I'm dividing 23 ways. So I said, "That's not very much. You're gonna get, like, half a penny for every book that's sold, but maybe we'll sell 1,000,000 books and you'll be rich."
There you go. Well, and that's the other thing too, right? Now that you've got those kids invested, so now they need to be out marketing the book, right?
Well, not only that, they need to follow the secrets because they've written about them, right? So that's committed them to actually do what the secrets suggest.
Well,
I got them over the barrel.
absolutely. Grandpa always wins.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell them, but you gotta do it subtly sometimes.
Sure. Well, and I wanted to ask you about how that shift from advice to secrets, how does that reveal about how we teach across generations and especially about moving off that posture of lecturing to more of a shared experience and a legacy building?
Well, that's a very good question, Greg, and it's something I had to learn, and so what I ended up doing on each there's 12 of these secrets. Let me give you an example, and then I'm gonna answer your question. I just opened this. I didn't know where it was gonna fall open. It opened to secret number 4, and this is for, like, 8 and 9 and 10-year-old kids, right? Or they're just at the end of middle school, they're at the end of elementary school, starting into middle school, some of them, who are 11 or 12. And there's some others they don't get them till they're older, but if imagine in your mind like a 11 or 12-year-old, and secret number 4 is called popularity, and it goes like this: good popularity comes from being nice to everyone, and it lasts. Bad popularity comes from only being nice to certain people, and it does not last. And obviously, what I'm trying to teach him is stay away from cliques and help out the kid who's left out and go sit by the one that's sitting by himself at lunch or whatever. But the thing that made it interesting is number 1, they all start with stories. And a lot of the stories that I tell in the book are about their aunts and uncles because they know their aunts and uncles. They look up to them and they want to hear a story about how that applied in their life. Then the second part, and this is to answer your question, how you transform from a lecture. So first you tell the stories, then there's some case studies. I'm an old business school guy, as you know, Greg, and the way you learn in MBA school is with case studies. And so there's 4 or 5 case studies where you're like, okay, you're Carl and you walk in and you see this happening and blah, blah, blah. And what do you do? And then the next case study. So you're drawing them into a conversation. And then the third part, this may surprise some of your viewers, but the third thing in each secret is memorization. It's a lost art, people used to memorize things and it got a bad name because people said, "Oh, well, that's just rote learning. They're just mimicking words and so on." It turns out that studies show that when you memorize something, you really internalize it and it stays with you. You can read it 100 times and it won't impact you as much as if you memorize it. So all of them are short enough that they can learn them. And so we have these sessions where, who can memorize it? Who can say it word perfect? Who can say it without a mistake? And they're a little competitive, some of them, and they all want to do it. And to true confession, I sometimes have been known to extend a little bribe, when you get it word perfect, I've got this $2 bill or something I'll give you. So they memorize them, and then I say, "Okay, now, would you like to take a month or so and work on this? And then if you write an experience you had with this secret, then you will know that I'm gonna put it in the book." And so they were pretty motivated and they all got busy. And I said, "You're not going to write one on every secret, but you pick your favorite secret or your 2 favorite ones and write a little experience on that." So that's a long answer, but the basic difference between a lecture, which will never work, I mean, you will in fact, it'll be counterproductive a lot of times. But if you can get them discussing through a case study, through a story, through memorizing, through what are your comments, and it really helps if there's more than one of them there. If it's just you as the grandpa talking to one kid, that kid's kinda overwhelmed, but if he's got a couple of cousins there with him or even a sibling, now there's more of them than there are of you, and you can kinda have this discussion and, it doesn't have to be perfect. If one of them has to go to the bathroom or it's getting late and they need to go play, just say, "Hey, we'll talk more about this tomorrow," you know? But you open it up and you keep it going. Especially good if you're at a family reunion or you're having a family dinner somewhere, or you're waiting for, the show to come on or whatever. Just use that little bit of time to say, "Hey, let's talk about some of the secrets."
Well, and I enjoyed a little bit of the challenge that you had in the book, The Grandparenting Blueprint, that we're talking about, is that you not only shared what you had going on with the grandchildren and their inputs, but you're also leaving this challenge out there for other grandparents to create their own secrets. And,
Right.
what surprised you the most about going through that process when you started going through and creating and documenting the secrets?
That's a beautiful question, and I'll just preface it with basically what you said. I expressly say in the book, in fact, I think it's right in the preface, I say, "Don't this is" I'm not suggesting these are gonna be your secrets. In fact, if they are, if you just copy my secrets, pass them on to your kids, they won't mean much to you or to the kids. I said, "My challenge to you" and you can only do like 10 or 12 at the most. Don't do more than that or it'll get away from you. So that and it's a pretty big challenge. What are the 10 life lessons that you would like if you had a magic wand and you could bequeath on your grandkids certain patterns they're going to follow or lessons they're going to live by, what would those be? What are the most valuable things you've learned in your life that you wish your kids would follow up on and maybe do better than you did on them? And that's a big, no one should approach that lightly because that is the hidden agenda, if you will, Greg, in this book is it's gonna cause I say grandfathers because that's what I am, but so far I think we've had more grandmas by the book, and that doesn't surprise anybody, right? But whether you're a grandpa or a grandma, if you put in the effort to figure out and there's no downside to this. I mean, you don't have to show these to your kids until you get them right. So it should take a little time. It should take a few weeks or even a few months to figure out what are my 10 life lessons. And I guarantee you, once you've figured those out, you're going to want to give those to your grandkids because that's the most valuable thing you've got. That's more valuable than money. That's more valuable than helping them with their college education. That's something that's really a legacy. And so you develop your own, and then one at a time, you reveal them. You decide what age that is best for, and you open it up to those grandkids and the word secrets becomes pretty important because, hey, this is a 12-year-old secret. You're only 9, Johnny, so I'd really like to tell you about this, but I can't tell it to you till you're 12, and so you get a little anticipation going, and then when you reveal it to them, they really pay attention.
What has been one of the rules of thumb or some of the guidance that you had as far as staging when revealing a secret is appropriate based on age and experience?
Well, I gotta confess, my wife Linda helped me a lot with that. My tendency was, well, let's give them to them early rather than late because, you know, number 1, they're less cynical when they're younger, they'll accept them better and so on. And Linda's like, "No, if you tell them some of this stuff too early, it's gonna go right over their heads, and they might memorize it just to please you or get your bribe or whatever, but they're not gonna internalize it." So we spend a lot of time. I mean, and by the way, the earliest we do them is 8 years old. We think that that's kind of a magic age. I think when kids are 8, most of them are, I don't know how to say it, they have a conscience. They begin to sort of sense when something's right or it's wrong. They begin to sort of take a little responsibility. In fact, they're actually kind of flattered by responsibility when they're around that age. Like, "Hey, honey, guess what? You're old enough to do this, or you're old enough to have this secret," or whatever. When they're 6 or 5 or whatever, just play with them, guys. I mean, let's not get too into the legacy thing until they get old enough to understand. So for the very first ones, I mean, like if you were to look at the table of contents here, you'd see that they're divided up. Okay, there's the age 8 secrets. There's some for age 10, some for age 12, some for age 14, one for age 16, one for age 18, and then there's one for, this is the advanced course. This is one secret for your married grandchild when you have one. And so that makes it kind of fun. But the early ones are pretty simple. Like if I turn to number one, you got an 8-year-old sitting there. And so number one, the secret is called joy. And it goes, joy is actually the purpose of life, and it's a choice you make every day. Well, it's a very simple concept, right? You can decide if you're going to be optimistic and happy that day or if you're going to grump around. You can make that decision every day. By the way, that's a good one in the sense of kids commenting on it, they really got into that, and so that was a lot of fun.
Well, and I'm wondering too if developing this secrets and this list for the connection points also helps take those grandfathers that may be a little bit, I don't know, not as active in their grandchildren's lives and helps create that bridge to create that interaction.
Yeah, that's very perceptive, Greg, because as you know, in fact, the last time we did the show together was on an earlier book I did called Being a Proactive Grandpa and Being a Proactive Grandfather. And the feedback I got on that book is that even the word proactive scared a lot of guys. It was like, wow, that sounds like a pretty big task. I mean, I'm not sure it was almost like, what am I supposed to be, a professional here? What does proactive mean, And so the idea in this book, and by the way, grandmas don't seem to have that problem. They want all you can give them, but some of us grandpas want it simplified a little. And so this is a book for both grandpas and grandmas, but the idea is, I'm not going to tell you what kind of grandparent to be. I'm just going to give you some tools that if you are like so many, I mean, there are millions of grandparents out there who would like to be more involved with their grandkids, but they just do not know where to start. They may not feel like they communicate very well with kids. They may feel like, gee, I don't want to step on the toes of my kids who are the parents. They may have, or to be blunt, some of them may say, "Hey, I've done my thing. I've raised my kids. I'm gonna go play golf," but in the back of their minds, most of us really wanna have a relationship with our grandkids. It's just natural. We just want that. And so in the blueprint, I'm trying, and that's why it's called a blueprint. What is a blueprint? It's a plan, right? I mean, it's something to follow, although the publisher decided on that name. I wanted to call it Grandparent Secrets, and the publisher's like, Secrets is a little bit of a problem in a parenting book or grandparenting. That could have a dark connotation. Let's have the secrets in it, but let's call it a blueprint, which means a plan." And I said, "Do people even know what a blueprint is anymore?" And he had a great answer. He said, "Grandparents do." That wouldn't be a good parenting book. They'd say, "What on earth is a blueprint?" We know it's a plan, and so the idea here is to say, you need some tools. You wanna be a good mechanic, you need some tools. You wanna be a good grandpa or good grandma, you don't have time to go discover the wheel and figure out all your own ways to do it. So here are some plans, and you pick the ones that work for you, you know? And again, don't use my secrets, but if one of mine jogs you into one of yours, great.
Well, and I think even too, just the themes that you have, right, might not be somebody taking your secrets, but it's like, here's this theme that really resonates with me and something that I hope to leave as a legacy character building experience between me
Right.
and my grandchildren.
Fact, that's interesting, Greg, because the guy just yesterday said, yeah, I thought that they would just read The Secret and say, well, I want to create my own. This guy was saying, I was reading the stories you told about The Secret, and I thought of a story I had, which goes a little different direction, but it's my story. It's a story I want to tell my grandkids. And by golly, it's actually it sort of contains a principle or a secret, and it's mine. I It happened to me, you know? So that's what's good about, you talk about it being interactive with your grandkids. I want this book to be interactive with other grandparents who are saying, "Oh, that's a good idea, but I think I have one that's better for me."
That's great. And the other part of that too, with the lessons, and you talked about the case studies. So in, my business school courses, we were doing those Harvard and Stanford case studies.
Yeah,
Not all of them had happy endings. Sometimes the
that's
company
right.
folded
That's right.
or was sold, whatever it was. How do you feel about a grandfather sharing a secret, but maybe a secret where things didn't quite work out for granddad, whether we were back in
Yeah.
school or something? And of course, appropriately.
Well, no, that's very important. If they're all sugar coated and it's like, "Hey, it worked out beautifully for me, and you just try it," you know? On the contrary, I mean, the secret itself is like a principle that you believe in, so that's a solid thing, but when you get telling stories about it, sometimes the best stories are, "I wish I had done this differently. I faced this situation. I'm probably made a mistake. I can now see if I had known the secret I'm trying to teach you now, I probably would have made a better decision." And here's the other funny thing. Sometimes the grandkids did that for me. Like on the one I'll give you an example on that one I read about, being nice to everyone, not trying to be popular, but trying to be, a friend to everyone. One of our little granddaughters, who was 11 years old at the time, wrote a little story. I swear to you, Greg, it made me cry because she was brave enough to cast herself as the one who made the mistake. And what she said is that she and a couple of her friends were in the bathroom at the school making fun of another kid who wasn't there. They didn't think she was there, but she was in one of the stalls listening to them badmouth her. I mean, and little girl preteens are so cliquish, right? And they were saying some really nasty things about her. And our little granddaughter Zara said suddenly the door opened and this girl comes out sobbing and just running out the door, and she said, "I have never felt so ashamed of myself in my whole life." And she said, "I went and apologized to her, and I promised myself I would always be nice to everyone, whether I know them or not." And I'm like, "Man, I couldn't have told a better story than that." So
Yeah, absolutely. And what's great is that she kind of learned that lesson when she was younger, that the stakes
right.
weren't as high as they sometimes get in high school or college or early career when you might be talking about the boss who might be in the stall or something else, you know?
Exactly. Exact Well, and again, that's the underlying current of the book, right? Is if you can get some of these principles into your kids' heads while they're young, who knows what you'll save them from? Because you and I and a lot of us grew up in the world of hard knocks, and we learn some things the hard way, and so will our grandkids. But anything we can teach them that'll move them through some of those hard times a little bit easier, boy, that's a great gift.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of, everybody as they go through life are going to get bumps and bruises. And
Right,
if I can point out where some of the obstacles are and my sons and grandkids can avoid some of those, then that's a
right.
win. They can save those experiences for somewhere else down the road.
Well said. I couldn't agree more.
Now, Richard, who is this book designed for? Is this for the brand new grandparent? Is this for the seasoned pro? Who is this book really designed for?
Well, I could say, since you're not gonna use the secrets or the principles in it with kids until they're old enough to understand, like 8 years old, I could say, well, it's probably written for somewhat seasoned who have grandkids at least that age. But I'll tell you what I really feel in my heart. I started way too late on thinking about grandparenting, and I'm playing catch up sometimes. I This very night, half an hour after we finish recording, I'm going down to give a speech that I'm really looking forward to because I got a call from a guy I've never met before, and he said, "Look, I've known about your books, and I know you've got a new one out." And he said, "I'm 48 years old, and I'm gonna be a grandpa in 6 months. My oldest child is gonna make me a grandfather." And I've got a bunch of other guys together, and we're all pretty young, but we wanna be good grandpas. Would your book appeal to me? And I said, "I'll be down there, buddy, because if you start thinking as a 48-year-old about what kind of grandpa you're gonna be, you're gonna blow it off the chart. You're gonna be great. So I'll give you some principles, and it'll give you time to think about it, and by the time you get into real grandparenting, you're gonna be ready."
Well, and I like that story that you're telling us because one of the things that we've talked about, one of the things that's in your books has been, you know, we're really parents for a very short period of time in most cases.
Right. 18
However,
years, and then they're gone.
we might be grandparents for 40 years or over. And
Yeah,
people
yeah.
prepare a lot for being a parent, but not
That's
really for
r
being a grandparent.
That is so true. I mean, people are scared to death to be parents, and so they're buying books and listening to podcasts and trying to figure it out before they have any babies, and yet we just suddenly become a grandparent. We're like, "What do I do now?" "Where's the owner's manual?" And so that you make a great point. I think people need to this is something you wanna be ready for when it happens, and you won't be fully ready. There will be a lot of surprises, but you'll at least figure out that, hey, grandparenting is not an extension of parenting. It's a whole different ballgame. And I need to think about that, and then I can be a good grandpa or a
Well,
good grandma. I keep saying grandpa, but you know what I mean.
I do. I think that ties back into the book really well in that blueprints are the things that you start out with that if everything goes perfect, this is how the structure is going to be. This is how the
Yeah.
project plan is going to be. But we
Yeah.
always get into situations where requirements change, budgets change, unintended consequences of construction or building happen. So plans always and blueprints always get modified as they go through construction.
I have never thought of that till this minute, but you just gave me a great line, Greg, because right now we're building a home up by a lake, and I can't tell you. The contractor calls them something. What does he call them?
Change
Cost
orders?
overruns, or it ends up costing you more because you're changing the plans, but you have to do it because if you don't, you're gonna get the house built and you say, "Man, I knew I should have changed that," right? So, yeah, a blueprint is not a one-time deal. You gotta keep your pen out and change it as you go along.
Absolutely. And Richard, as we start to wrap things up, where can people find and order the book? Where can people listen, and get connected with you and the work that you're doing?
Well, I'm glad for that question because have I got a deal for you. Because of my affinity for you, Greg, I've got you and a few others, mostly podcasters like yourself. I got the publisher to agree that I can buy my books for 40% off. Isn't that nice
Okay.
of them? They sell me my own book. I only have to pay 60%. But he agreed, the publisher is a good friend of mine, and he's a grandpa, and he agreed that he will sell the book for 40% off. It's a $20 book, he'll sell it for 12. So I don't want your listeners to buy, they can buy it on Amazon, they can buy it in a bookstore. I would rather have them go to the link you're gonna put in your show notes, which is just a one click to a website, and I'll send you the code, the coupon code. All they do is put that in. As they check out, they put that in, and it reduces the price from 20 to $8 for to $12.
Okay, that sounds awesome. And do we want to also share with folks how they get connected with your different courses and some of the other books you've written?
Yeah, that's nice of you to mention. There's one website, it's a one-stop shopping. It's called valuesparenting.com, as you know, all strung together. The word values with an S and then parenting. And they'll find all of our books, they'll find our courses, they'll find just a bunch of stuff that we like to share with people, and they can share back with us.
That sounds fantastic. And we'll be putting the links and the coupon code, everything into the show notes because I know people listen to this at the gym or mowing grass
Yeah.
or whatever they're doing.
Yes,
So
yes.
we'll make it super easy for them to get a hold of your book, The Grandparenting Blueprint. Anything else, Richard, that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you?
Well, I think the one thing, well, two really quick things. The secrets are the last 2/3 of the book. People should know this. The first third is called Grandparenting Basics, and it is just really basic stuff about how to communicate with different ages, how to be sure you're not stepping on the toes of your children who are the parents, how to be up to speed on what the latest social media that the grandkids are using and how to tie in, just a lot of stuff that, if you're gonna try to get into these secrets, you better have some basic, you gotta be ready to communicate before you do it. So there's that first part, and then the only other thing I'd say is don't approach grandparenting as a task. Parenting is a task, grandparenting is a joy. You don't have to feed them or clothe them or discipline them or anything else. You can just be their champion, their cheerleader, their encourager, their supporter, and all those roles are fun.
Absolutely. And, what's so great about that too is that these secrets, these things that you're sharing with us on how to build deeper connections with the grandchildren is really something that's going to strengthen families and will help kids even through rocky times because occasionally mom and dad, the grandkids already know what they're going to say, but maybe grandma and grandpa come up with a different answer or a different solution.
Absolutely. I don't ever say it takes a village to raise a child. I always say it takes parents and grandparents. Especially in a
Absolutely.
world where most of the parents, both of them are working and they're not around as much as I'd like, and they're so close to the kids with the discipline and the supervision and the correction, they don't have the luxury of being able to sit down with a kid like we do as grandparents and just say, "Hey, I'm proud of you, I love you, what can I help you with?" "I'm your biggest cheerleader."
I love that. That ties in. One of the things I love to talk about is that parenting is a very tactical situation. It's day to day. It's, book
Right.
bags and lunches. Grandparenting becomes much more strategic thinking. You can slow down a
Very
little
good.
bit. You can take a longer perspective.
Yeah. I totally agree. Aren't we lucky to be grandparents? And everyone listening, just be grateful because, man, you had to work a long time for this, and now you're a grandpa or a grandma. Live it up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Richard, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I really have enjoyed this conversation with you.
My pleasure, Greg, and you are a cool grandpa.
Thank you. I'm going to cut that out and send it to my grandkids when they're older.
All right, brother.
I enjoyed having Richard on. As you probably guessed, we really enjoy each other's company and especially talking about grandparenting. We both come at this with different prisms that we look through, but the effect is still the same. how do we build up our grandchildren? How do we build up the next generation? How do we share the secrets that we've earned and that we've learned to them so that maybe they don't have an easier time, but maybe they have a little bit better navigation starting out on the road to adulthood that perhaps maybe we didn't. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Richard. I know I did. Remember, Richard has given us a discount code, so that's in the show notes. So be sure to check that out and be sure to order your copy of the Grandparenting Blueprint: How to Teach Your Grandchildren Life's Most Important Lessons. So I hope you've enjoyed it. And until next time, remember to stay cool.